So last night was the GOP primary debate. I was actually on a panel on the Katie Halper show watching it live. It was entertaining, I have to admit. I didn't think it would be, considering the fact that Trump wasn't a part of the debate, but it was pretty entertaining. And there's a couple of highlights that I want to discuss and some things I think that we need to pay attention to. And there's also a poll in reference to this as well. Now, first, I want to start off. This is actually kind of funny. Glenn Greenwald was actually there covering the primary debates, and he noticed something. So it turns out that Glenn was sitting right behind Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene at the GOP presidential debate. It says her attention appears to be at least divided. Let's see what Glenn's talking about. So this is Marjorie Taylor Greene, and on her phone, it looks like she's watching the Tucker Carlson interview with Donald Trump. Let me see. Hold on. Let me zoom in better. There we go. See? So she was watching, I guess she was watching that interview, listening to that and the debate at the same time. So that was pretty interesting. Had to start off with something funny. Okay. There were some winners. I think there were some losers. I'm going to tell you who I think won, despite what the New York Post is saying. And I'm going to tell you who I think needs to leave this race. Okay? Let's get started here with Nikki Haley. There's a clip here of Nikki Haley where I feel like she said something on that stage last night that none of the other candidates said or were willing to admit. And that is that Nikki Haley did not just blame the Democratic Party in reference to the economy. She also blamed the Republican Party. Let's take a look.
I don't care about polls. What I care about the fact is that no one is telling the American people the truth. The truth is that Biden didn't do this to us. Our Republicans did this to us too. When they passed that $2.2 trillion COVID stimulus bill, they left us with 90 million people on Medicaid, 42 million people on food stamps. No one has told you how to fix it. I'll tell you how to fix it. They need to stop the spending. They need to stop the borrowing. They need to eliminate the earmarks that the Republicans brought back in. And they need to make sure they understand these are taxpayer dollars. It's not their dollars. And while they're all saying this, you have Ron DeSantis, you've got Tim Scott, you've got Mike Pence. They all voted to raise the debt. And Donald Trump added $8 trillion to our debt. And our kids are never going to forgive us for this. And so at the end of the day, you look at the 2024 budget, Republicans asked for $7.4 billion in earmarks. Democrats asked for $2.8 billion. So you tell me who are the big spenders. I think it's time for an accountant in the White House.
Vice President.
She was the only one brave enough to say that. Now, do I agree with everything that she said? No. No, I don't. I don't think the spending is as much of an issue. I think they need to talk about, they're not going to do two, but I think they need to talk about MMT. I think they need to talk about monetary theory so they can understand how the government spends money. But that being said, she seemed to be the only one. This was at the beginning of the debate to call out Biden and Donald Trump in the same sentence. Now, why is that good for Nikki? That makes people remember her. That makes Nikki stand out. When you have 8 people on the stage, it's kind of easy to be one of those candidates that just fades into the background. I'm going to tell you who some of those people were. For me, that just kind of faded into the background. They're going into the wall. But that makes her stand out. So she was stronger than I thought that she would be. So Nikki Haley was willing to call out both in reference to the economy. Now we move on to this issue here with abortion. Let me make sure I'm pulling up the right one. Ron DeSantis. It was just mind-boggling to me just hearing them argue over how many weeks, and to hear people tell that repetitive lie that Democrats want people to be able to have an abortion all the way up to the time of birth. That is not true. But this particular topic, to me, they weren't even together on this. Things are different. Things are different now. So here's Ron DeSantis' response. I want you to hear what he had to say in reference to abortion.
Well, I would say we sold the biggest election landslide victory in the history of the Republican Party in the state of Florida in 2022. That's what I did. We can win. But second of all, look, you got to do what you think is right. I believe in a culture of life. I was proud to sign the heartbeat bill. I remember one of the most impactful moments of my life was when I heard the heartbeat of my oldest daughter in my wife's womb, and then saw the sonograms of all three of my kids. What the Democrats are trying to do on this issue is wrong, to allow abortion all the way up to the moment of birth. I know a lady in...
You hear that? See, that's a repetitive talking point. That is not true. That is not true. You know, both parties lie. Both parties tell exaggerations about the other party. But we have to start calling these things out.
Florida named Penny. She survived multiple abortion attempts. She was left discarded in a pan. Fortunately, her grandmother saved her and brought her to a different hospital. We're better than what the Democrats are selling. We are not going to allow abortion all the way up till birth, and we will hold them accountable for their extremism.
But just to be
Did you notice that he said it twice? Turnout was low in Florida. His landslide victory is a stretch. Notice he said it twice. He said it towards the beginning and he said it again towards the end so that you'll remember it. You know, as long as they continue to repeat it, then you start to receive it and then you start to believe it. Let's continue.
clear, Governor, would you sign a 6-week ban federally?
I'm going to stand on the side of life. Look, I understand Wisconsin is going to do it different than Texas. I understand Iowa and New Hampshire are going to do different. But I will support the cause of life as governor and as president.
Hey, Sean Hannity here.
Let's pause here. So he didn't really answer that question in reference to would he support a 6-week federal ban? So he's like, well, I'm pro-life and that still doesn't really answer the question. So I think Ron DeSantis in some way, shape or form, for whatever reason, he wasn't willing to be direct with his answer in reference to the 6 weeks. And I think it's because he knows, or his campaign team has warned him, that even when it comes to some Republicans in this country, that is not a popular opinion when we talk about a woman's right to choose. So that's the only thing that I can think of as to why he was not more direct with his response. Now, I just saw someone, you see it, Corey, let me know. I just saw someone in the chat said they were just there. I have to find it in a second. Now we're going to go to Nikki Haley in reference to her response in reference to a federal abortion ban. Like I said, it was really weird to hear them argue about weeks.
We need to stop demonizing this issue. This is talking about the fact that unelected justices didn't need to decide something this personal because it's personal for every woman and man. Now it's been put in the hands of the people. That's great. When it comes to a federal ban, let's be honest with the American people and say it will take 60 Senate votes. It will take a majority of the House. So in order to do that, let's find consensus. Can't we all agree that we should ban late-term abortions? Can't we all agree that we should encourage adoptions? Can't we all agree that doctors and nurses who don't believe in abortion shouldn't have to perform them? Can't we all agree that contraception should be available? And can't we all agree that we are not going to put a woman in jail or give her the death penalty if she gets an abortion?
Let me just pause here for a second because there was one thing I had to say. Shouldn't contraception be available? How is it not, though? Like, contraception is available, right? So that part there was interesting. I don't know. She lost me a little bit on that. But another part that she said here that I think, again, other people on the stage did not mention or were not willing to admit, the fact that Nikki Haley said you need 60 seats in the Senate and you need to have they need to have control of the Senate and of the House. So what she was admitting to people is that unless that happens, she really can't sit up here and make any promises to you in reference to some type of federal law when it comes to abortion. No one else wanted to mention that. And we see this happening every debate. Everyone gets up there and they say what they're going to do, but they never want to mention, well, yes, if we had the House and the Senate, but this is what we need, this, we need that, and then we can make these things happen. So she's already put this stuff out there. So if she were to win, well, I don't think she's going to, but if she were to win, you can't come back and say, why didn't you get these things done? She can always point back to this debate and say, I told you that we needed to have this, this, and this in order for me to do this. So just something to think about.
Let's treat this like a respectful issue that it is and humanize the situation and stop demonizing the situation.
And I've been a champion for life in the Congress, a champion for life as governor and as vice president. And to be honest with you, Nikki, you're my friend, but consensus is the opposite of leadership. When the Supreme Court returned this question to the American people, they didn't just send it to the states only. It's not a states only issue, it's a moral issue. And I promise you, as President of the United States, the American people will have a champion for life in the Oval Office. Can't we have a minimum standard in every state in the nation that says when a baby is capable of feeling pain, an abortion cannot be allowed? A 15-week ban is an idea whose time has come. It's supported by 70% of the American people.
When you're talking about,
you see how they're arguing over weeks, 6 weeks, 15 weeks.
a federal ban. Be honest with the American people. We haven't had 45 pro-life senators in over 100 years. So no Republican president can ban abortions any more than a Democrat president could ban all those state laws. Don't make women feel like they have to decide on this issue when you know we don't have 60 Senate votes in the House.
70%.
See, this is where she's strong. This is where she's strong. Again, I don't agree with Nikki Haley's politics at all. I think she's a war hawk. She was my governor when I lived in South Carolina. I don't agree with her in reference to the politics. But she's right here to explain to not only just Mike Pence, but to everyone else in the audience and the viewers watching, don't sit up there and lie to these people and make them believe that you're going to be able to do this as president of the United States because we don't have the seats. Again, it makes her stand out. So that's smart.
Percent of the American people support legislation
but
to ban
70%
abortion
of the
after
Senate
a baby is
does
capable
not.
of experiencing pain.
70% of the American people support the 15-week ban is what he's saying. But what she had to clarify is that 70% of politicians in the Senate do not. And that's actually what matters. So she found ways to make herself stand out. Other than the fact that she was the only female candidate on the stage, she found other ways to make herself stand out. In reference to this abortion issue, there was one piece that I felt was missing from the debate last night. Healthcare. Because abortion is still a part of healthcare. And out of all the things that they discussed last night, it was really interesting to me that healthcare was not brought into the conversation the way that it should have been, particularly if you're talking about abortion. Now, when we bring up healthcare, that brings me back to healthcare for everybody, right? Universal healthcare. There's all these other countries that have healthcare for everyone in their country. And then there's the US, like the wealthiest country in the world. And we can blame different things. We can say it's because the profit from big pharma, that there are all these politicians taking money from big pharma, so they're never going to approve it. That's part of it. But this was never meant to happen. And I want to show you why it was never meant to happen. Because we talk a lot of times on this channel about class and race. Class and race and race and class. And we often talk about how they're actually intertwined. When it comes to the healthcare issue, I want to show you a video, and I did look this up, as to why we don't have healthcare for everybody in this country, not just because of big pharma, but we're going all the way back from the very beginning when there were other presidents who also posed the idea of having universal healthcare and why it was shot down. Everybody listen to this video. We're all connected, whether you believe it or not. Listen to this.
White people, watch this video. and I'll be right back.
He published a book called Race Tendencies and Traits of the American Negro, in which he lays out all the numbers, and then he concludes that if we simply avoided allowing black people to have any access to health care, that within 2 or 3 generations, the whole race would die out, and that would solve the race problem in America. When Teddy Roosevelt, 1912, proposed a national health care system, people said no because black people will get it. When Franklin Roosevelt proposed a national health care system, it was the same thing. We don't want black people to get it.
I'm going to let this finish, but that's already 2 presidents way before Bernie Sanders decided to run for president or was even born. Maybe not born, but before he decided to run for president, who already tried to do this. National health care plan for everybody. Universal health care for everybody. Going all the way back then, before politicians were taking money from Big Pharma, before we had super PACs. Let's let him finish.
When Truman tried it in 47, same thing. Don't want black people to get it. We have to figure out a way to keep black people from using Medicare. And the way that they came up with was to have a 20% hole, a gap in Medicare, so that you had to pay 20% of your doctor's bill and your hospital bill. And that would discourage poor black people from showing up at the hospitals. Nearly 100% of the reason why the United States is the only country in the world that doesn't define healthcare as a right is because of racism. He published a book.
Let me pause here for a second. He mentioned that 20%. Let me go back for a little bit because that piece is important.
Of the reason why the United States is the only country in the world that doesn't define healthcare as a right is because of racism. He published a book called Race Tendencies and Traits of the American Negro.
Let me chime in here for a second. That 20% that he was referring to, that's that co-insurance. And does that discourage black people from going to the doctor and going to get like healthcare treatments or checkups and things like that? Absolutely. But not just black people. You see what ends up happening? Some of these policies and laws that were implemented in this country to keep black people down and to affect black people, it actually ended up impacting poor and working class white people. And this is where class and race intersect. This is why when I tell you class is race and race is class, this is exactly what I'm referring to. So some of the policies that were implemented in this country to keep black people down, they didn't realize at the time that that would actually hurt poor and working class white people too. Listen to what she says.
How many times do I have to say this? Racism is a detriment to you white folks, poor white folks especially. Yep. Because of racism, you poor white folks can't even get good health care because they thought if they could deny health care to black people that we would have been eradicated a long time ago. But hey, we still here and they have not changed the rules. How crazy is that? Even with Social Security, you have to pay 20% because of racism. We keep telling you, BIPOC keep telling you, black people keep telling you, it is not us that makes your life suck. It is those racist politicians and their racist legislation that they think that's going to harm us, but harms you at the same time. And they don't care if it harms you. They don't give a shit. And then you continue to vote against your own interests.
And they don't care if it harms you because, again, if you are not in their class bracket, they don't care about you. They don't care about poor people. They don't care about working class people. Why do you think they let the companies treat the unions the way they do? These people go on strike and they go vote against them anyway. Why do you think they let the people, the laborers, are treated the way that they are in this country? They don't care if you're black, right? That's a class issue, right? But then you have to look at who's the working class. This is why. This is why. So what killed me was last night, as much as they were talking about abortion and all this other stuff, I'm like, where is the healthcare conversation, particularly considering we just went through a pandemic in this country? There were a lot of things that were missing last night from that debate that I'm like, I can't believe they're not even talking about this. I'll let her finish and we'll go back to the highlights.
All because a bunch of rich white people told y'all to hate black people because black people are doing stuff to you. as a whole. And we're not, because we don't control shit. We don't control the healthcare system. We don't control Social Security. We don't control your wages. We don't control shit. But they continue to tell you that it's us. So you turn your focus on us and harass the shit out of us for no fucking reason, when we have no power to affect your life as a whole community. Pay attention.
I mean, it's true. Someone said, Corey, I think they want the link to that video. If you can put the link to the TikTok in the chat whenever you get a chance. But yeah. Like it. And that's the thing that people don't understand. Meanwhile, rich people are exploiting all of us. All of us, man. They continue to tell you it's because of the immigrants. It's because of the black people. It's because of this person. It's because of that person. No. They just want to get you to blame someone else, have someone else be the scapegoat, so you're not paying attention to what they're doing. Because if you're paying attention to what they're doing, you realize they're the ones that are the problem. Now we get back to the debate. We're going to bring up this guy named Doug. Now, Doug Burgum, I'm going to tell you something that was missing with him too. Doug is from North Dakota. Now, Doug is going to tell you about some challenges that we're facing in this country. But there's something the entire night. Doug was on this stage and had millions of viewers. Doug left out something very important that you guys should know. And I'm going to tell you what Doug didn't tell you. This was his opportunity and he blew it.
I understand why America's hurting. Biden's inflation is choking us. I grew up in a small town. My dad died when I was a freshman in high school. My mom, widow of 3, went back to work. Every job I had growing up was one where I took a shower at the end of the day, not at the beginning of the day.
That can be taken different ways. Some people get your mind out the gutter, but that can be taken different ways.
Our cities are less safe because of the fentanyl pouring into this country. Our economy is being crushed by Biden's energy policies, which are raising the cost of every product you buy, not just the gasoline at the pump. One thing that I'll do as president, I'll secure the border. I'll get this economy sprinting, not crawling like it is right now. And I would say that other thing is for sure, when I'm on a horseback in the Badlands of North Dakota, it looks like the horizon is just limitless. And when you can almost see beyond that horizon, you can see that this great country, our future is unlimited. But we've got to focus on innovation, not regulation. We've got to cut the red tape. We got to drive ourselves forward. The way we win the Cold War with China is by growing our economy and through innovation. And as president, I will bring out the best of America. I will improve every American life.
Here's what Doug forgot to mention. The entire 2 hours last night, Doug is from North Dakota. He said it multiple times throughout the debate. Here he is talking about the economy, how the economy is a mess and a disaster. He goes on to tell you he grew up in a small town. But not once through the entire night does Doug tell you what they have in North Dakota that the other states in this country do not have. A public bank. The Bank of North Dakota. This was your moment, Doug. And I ain't even trying to rock with Doug like that. But this was his moment. You're on the national stage. This was your moment to tell everybody about public banking and that you have a public bank in North Dakota. Not once did he mention how people in North Dakota actually were not affected by the 2008 housing crisis the way that people in other states were. You know why? Because they have a public bank. You blew it, Doug. Like, I was watching this last night and I was thinking to myself, if Roger Meadows sees this and he sees that this guy's from North Dakota, the first thing Roger's going to say is, you're not going to mention how you were able to do some of those things in North Dakota because you have a public bank? This really could have been Doug's moment, and Doug blew it. Bye, Doug. That's something people should know about. We're moving on to Vivek. Vivek probably was the most attacked candidate on the stage last night. You would think people would come after Ron DeSantis since he's in second place, but no. People were coming after Vivek. They did not like Viv. I'm going to show you the first clip here. This is in reference to Ukraine. Now, what was very telling last night is I said there are certain people who really stand out, and there are people who started to fade into the background. Doug missed his moment and faded into the background. Vivek really stood out last night, in my opinion. And one of the reasons that he stood out is because when it came to the question about giving Ukraine more money, he was the only candidate who raised his hand and said no. So you can't forget that. Let's see the exchange here.
Mr. Ramaswamy, you would not support an increase of funding to Ukraine.
I would not. And I think that this is disastrous, that we are protecting against an invasion across somebody else's border when we should use those same military resources to prevent across the invasion of our own southern border here in the United States of America. We are driving Russia further into China's hands. The Russia-China alliance is the single greatest threat we face. And I find it offensive that we have professional politicians on the stage that will make a pilgrimage to Kyiv, to their Pope, Zelensky, without doing the same thing for people in Maui or the south side of Chicago or Kensington. I think that we have to put the interests of Americans first, secure our own border instead of somebody else's. And the reality is, this is also how we project strength by making America strong at home.
All right, Mr. Ramaswamy, you would not.
So again, he was the only one that said he would not give more aid to Ukraine. And what was very telling to me is that the other candidates on the stage, I feel like, the neocons, I feel like they are not in touch with the rest of the base, at least the Republican base, that are not for these wars. Did you guys see the difference last night? Did you see the difference between the things that Vivek was saying and the things that Ron DeSantis was kind of there sometimes, but the things that people like Nikki and Tim Scott and Christie were saying? They just kind of want to go along with the okie doke and want things for the most part to remain the way that they were in their party pre-Trump, right? For the most part. Vivek stands out because he's asking for something different. So to me, it did seem like the rest of the candidates seem to be out of touch. Now there's more. I want to bring up the climate issue, which was raised last night. There was definitely heated exchange here between Vivek and Christie. Listen to this. Now, we all know for the most part where Republicans stand on the climate issue, right? But even with this issue, you could see the difference. Listen to this.
Polls consistently show that young people's number one issue is climate change. How will you, as both President of the United States and leader of the Republican Party, calm their fears that the Republican Party doesn't care about climate change?
So we want to start on this with a show of hands. Do you believe in human behavior is causing climate change? Raise your hand if you do.
Look, we're not school children.
First of all, listen to the way that the question was worded, right? Human behavior. That's broad. That can mean different things, right?
Have the debate. I mean, I'm happy to take it to start. Alexander?
So do you want to raise your hand or not?
I don't think that's the way to do. So let me just say to Alexander this. First of all, one of the reasons our country's decline is because of the way the corporate media treats Republicans versus Democrats. Biden was on the beach while those people were suffering. He was asked about it. He said, no comment. Are you kidding me? As somebody that's handled disasters in Florida, you got to be activated. You've got to be there. You've got to be present. You've got to be helping people who are doing this. And here's the deal.
Let's just answer the question.
So is that a yes or is that a yes?
The question was...
Is that a hand raise?
You do not
I think it was a hand raise for him, and it's my hands are in my pockets.
No,
because
no, no.
The climate change agenda is a hoax.
Let
us be honest as Republicans. I'm the only person on the stage who isn't bought and paid for, so I can say this. The climate change agenda is a hoax. The climate change agenda is a hoax.
So here's Vivek basically calling out that the other candidates are, I guess, bought and paid for by corporate interests, corporate money, but Vivek is corporate too. So I don't know what he's trying to do here. But do you see this? Now, obviously, he doesn't believe in climate change. I disagree heavily with Vivek on this issue. But again, I felt like this was just another way to make himself stand out.
And we have to declare independence for it. And the reality is, the anti-carbon agenda is the wet blanket on our economy. And so the reality is, more people are dying of bad climate change policies than they are of actual climate change.
Governor Haley, are you bought and paid for?
Down by
Hold on.
in the last century.
Listen.
No.
That didn't make any sense. But watch this.
Wait, hold on.
I've had enough. I've had enough already tonight of a guy who sounds like ChatGPT standing up here. And the last person in one of these debates, Brett, who stood in the middle of the stage and said, "What's a skinny guy with an odd last name doing up here?" was Barack Obama, and I'm afraid we're dealing with the same type of amateur standing on stage tonight.
I told you guys, this is the one time you'll see me agree with Christie, and I'm going to show you the evidence of that in a second. I told you guys that Vivek reminded me a lot of Barack Obama. His mannerisms, some of the things that he's saying, not on policy, but his mannerisms, some of the things that he would say and the way that he would say it, the Harvard connection, the model minority, so to speak. I told you there was something there that reminded me of Barack Obama. Let them finish. The ChatGPT thing was kind of funny.
Give me a hug just like you did to Obama.
The same type of amateur.
And you'll help elect me just like you did to Obama, too. Give me that
the same type of amateur.
Hold on. Governor Haley, would you like to respond? Are you bought and paid for?
What I would like to say is the fact that I think this is exactly why Margaret Thatcher said, if you want something said, ask a man. If you want something done, ask a woman.
And here goes the woman card. Now I'm going to use this as an example to show you how both parties are similar, even when it comes to the identity card. Because if it was the other way around and it's the Democrats on the stage and it's a woman and she's a candidate for president, and if she says what Nikki says, if you want something done, ask a woman, the next morning on Fox News, it's going to be the Democrats using identity. But yet here you see the same thing happening. Here you see on the right, using the identity card. If you want something done, ask a woman. And then you can see on MSNBC or you can see in CNN, oh, look at her using the woman card because she's the only woman on stage. This is an example that shows you that both parties are similar. Let's continue.
First of all, we do care about clean air, clean water. We want to see that taken care of, but there's a right way to do it. And the right way to do it is, first of all, yes, is climate change real? Yes, it is. But if you want to go and really change the environment, then we need to start telling China and India that they have to lower their emissions.
That part right there is actually important. It has to be a global effort. It can't just be the United States, right? But here's Nikki Haley telling you that climate change is real. Let's continue. Interesting night.
That's where our problem is. And these green subsidies that Biden has put in, all he's done is help China, because he doesn't understand all these electric vehicles that he's done, what that does. Half of the batteries for electric vehicles are made in China. And so that's not helping the environment. You're putting money in China's pocket, and Biden did that. So first of all,
so make the electric batteries here. I don't know. Maybe it's a silly idea, but maybe we should go back to producing and manufacturing in this country like we used to. It just seemed like another reason for me to like throw shade towards China.
Well, I think we need to acknowledge the truth, which is these subsidies are not working. We also need to take on the international world and say, okay, India and China, you've got to stop polluting. And that's when we'll start to deal with
Senator Scott, are you bought and paid for?
Absolutely.
Are you bought and paid for?
I'm sorry?
Are you bought and paid
Absolutely not. I mean, here's what the American people deserve is a debate about the issues that affect their lives. Going back and forth, being childish is not helpful to the American people to decide on the next leader of our country. Number one, wait a second. And number two, as a kid who grew up in a single-parent household mired in poverty, I wondered, was the American dream real for kids who were devastated by poverty, devastated by the challenges of life? I came to the conclusion that America can do for anyone what she's done for me if we focus on restoring hope, creating opportunities, and protecting America. If we want the environment to be better, and we all do, the best thing to do is to bring our jobs home from China. If we create 10 million new jobs in my Made in America plan, we will have a better economy and a better environment. Let me tell you why I say that, Brett.
Nothing about the military industrial complex. This entire conversation in reference to climate, not one person mentioned anything about the military industrial complex, which is the largest single most polluter in the world. That piece is important.
America,
Do it quickly.
America has cut. I'm a Southern boy. I talk slow. So America.
Another one.
That was quick. America has cut our carbon footprint in half in the last 25 years. The places where they are continuing to increase, Africa, 950 million people. India, over 1 billion. China, over 1 billion. Why would we put ourselves at a disadvantage, devastating our own economy? Let's bring our jobs home.
Hey, Sean Hannity here.
Tim and Doug, I think they can go ahead and exit this race. And then I want to show you this clip here. Oh, we can go to the second part, Corey. Yeah, Tim and Doug, I think, can go home. There's also the guy I always forget about, Aisha Hutchinson. He can also go home. Half the time we don't remember he's standing there. Let's just keep it real. Christie might stick around for a little bit, but to be honest with you, I think that Christie is not actually running for president. I think he's running for fame. And I thought what was funny is this piece right here, when Vivek actually tells Christie that he's actually running to be president of MSNBC. Listen to this.
Swami, you raise your hand supporting.
No, I'd like to get in and respond. Let's just speak the truth, okay? President Trump, I believe, was the best president of the 21st century. It's a fact. And Christie, honest to God, your claim that Donald Trump is motivated by vengeance and grievance would be a lot more credible if your entire campaign were not based on vengeance and grievance against one man. And if people...
That's a good point. Like, this is the things, like, on policy, I do not agree with any of them. But that point, you kind of can't say that it's not true, because that's what Christie has been doing. Vote for me, I'm not Trump. That's what it feels like. Now, to that point, where Vivek may run into trouble is when he continues to say that Donald Trump was the best president of the 21st century. I thought Donald Trump was a great president. This is why that could hurt him. Basically, if that's how you feel, why are you running for president? Now, when he's asked that question, he goes on to say that because he wants to expand on Trump's policies, he wants to expand on what Trump did. Can't Donald Trump just do that since they were his policies? So this is why I would be careful, because, again, no one else on that stage is saying that. He's saying that. So it may come down to a point where voters have to decide, do they want to just vote for Donald Trump again and get the real deal, or do they want to vote for a Trump copy? You see what I'm saying? So he has to find a way to distinguish himself from that. Now, we'll go on to say other things, because Andrew Yang comes in here in just a second in reference to who he may remind you of as well.
At home, want to see a bunch of people blindly bashing Donald Trump without an iota of vision for this country, they could just change the channel to MSNBC right now. But I'm not running for president of MSNBC. I am running for president of the United States. We're skating on thin ice, and we cannot set a precedent where the party in power uses police force to indict its political opponents. It is wrong. We have to end the weaponization of justice in this country.
You raise your hand supporting.
So it's obvious, as you can see, Vivek was really a strong contender last night. And to that MSNBC point, I'm not going to play this entire clip, but I just want to prove a point. This morning, guess who was on MSNBC? Christie. Running for president of MSNBC.
And how do you think that you did in the debate last night? And what did you think of the field without Trump in it?
Well, look, I felt good about how we did last night. You know, I wanted to make sure that everybody, both in that arena and much more importantly, all of the people watching at home understand that I'm going to stand up and tell the truth about where our country needs to go and about how Donald Trump has failed us and would fail our party if he were ever made the nominee again. But also talked about important issues. You know, I guess Wes must have turned in early last night. Didn't hear me talking about education. I was talking about that last night on the stage, talking about my trip to Ukraine and how important it was for us to stand against Vladimir Putin. And when Vivek Ramaswamy was just, you know, getting too out of hand, the moderators wouldn't try to control him, so I did.
Oh, it's the moderator's fault. Mr. President of MSNBC, give me a news anchor spot, please. Give me a news anchor spot when this gig don't work out. My presidential campaign, Christie is thinking, right? That we're thinking. Now, Andrew Yang actually has had some good things to say about Vivek. And some people have pointed out that Andrew Yang or Vivek is actually the Andrew Yang of the GOP because he's an entrepreneur, right? He's successful entrepreneur like Andrew Yang was. Let's pull this up here. I want to show you what Andrew Yang said. I wrote a couple of weeks ago that it's Vivek. I think it is Vivek. I think I've been pronouncing his name wrong. I wrote a couple of weeks ago that it's Vivek who is most likely to defeat Trump in the Republican field. Last night didn't change my mind. But you know what didn't change my mind? Mine as well? The fact that Vivek reminded me of Barack Obama. And here's video evidence here.
So first, let me just address a question that is on everybody's mind at home tonight. Who the heck is this skinny guy with a funny last name, and what the heck is he doing in the middle of this debate stage? I'll tell you, I'm not a politician.
Of a mill worker's son who dares to defy the odds. The hope of a skinny kid with a funny name who believes that America has a place for him too.
I told you. I told you he reminded me of Barack Obama. There you go. Now, some people are criticizing the debate in reference to the importance of the issues that were discussed. Now, RFK Jr. said something. I do agree with this statement that he made, and I think people need to hear this. I know some of you like, Sabs, you've been hard on RFK Jr. lately. I say good things too. When there's good things done, I mention the good things as well. But this piece right here, I think is really important because he talked about what he felt was missing from the debate. The hashtag GOP debate last night was out of sync with the mood of the country. It began with a request for a comment on Oliver Anthony's Ain't Got a Dollar song, Richmond, North of Richmond. Not that it is an extraordinary song, raw yet intelligent, defiant yet compassionate. It's about working class hardship. It is about low wages, BS pay. It's about degraded food supply, elite corruption, obesity, homelessness, and despair. Candidates could have talked about these things, but they said nothing about the desperation plus the hardship of working people. They said nothing about wages or housing, food, childcare, plus medical costs, or what we can do about it. They said nothing about systemic corruption that enriches corporations plus elites as swaths of the former middle class fall into poverty. Instead, they recycled Reagan-era cliches about cutting spending, being tough on drugs and crime, China, etc., and ending abortion. They were obsessed with America's adversaries, but blind to how our policies have been deliberately constructed to create adversaries and enrich the defense industry while bankrupting the nation. They were obsessed with closing the border, which I agree with, but have no proposals to expand legal immigration or address the conditions that drive migration. Again, in large part, that is U.S. policy. They obsess about cutting spending, except defense. They want more of that, but offer not innovative proposals to address the decay of our infrastructure, wages, and environment. Our nation deserves better than posturing plus bickering masquerading as debate. Instead of arguing, we can tap into the swelling popular will to turn this country around. Oliver Anthony tapped into something that can unify our nation. Nearly everyone wants to reverse our decline, to end corruption, to rebuild from the inside. Let's talk about how to do that. They said none of those things. Nothing about housing, nothing about the wages, like the minimum wage wasn't mentioned. None of it. And again, this is where I say, I feel like with the exception of Vivek, I feel like the other candidates on that stage are out of touch. They are stuck in this Reagan type of politics that just doesn't really fly with the American people during a time when people are in such despair. And if you do not address the needs of the people in the nation, the people will turn away from you. Now, I think the biggest threat to Donald Trump for that reason is Vivek. The New York Post put out an article that said that Ron DeSantis was the winner of the first 2024 Republican debate. I disagree. I'm not even going to read that article, but I disagree. Ron DeSantis did better than I thought that he would. But you also have to remember that Ron DeSantis is backed by a lot of donors. He's also backed by Fox News. Remember that story came out where Rupert Murdoch decided not to go with Donald Trump and to go with Ron DeSantis this go round. So of course the media, the mainstream media, is going to say the person who won is the person that the donors want to win. Clearly, anyone who was watching that debate last night, I think the strongest contender that I saw is Vivek. And I think he did a better job than Ron DeSantis did. And I don't agree with any of these dudes' policies, but I can still see how people perform. And I think that's something that people need to address. Let's be real. You're already seeing it happening where the media is already going for Ron DeSantis. I think the American people who saw that debate last night can say that, no, he did not win. So they're already starting it. Glenn Greenwald also had criticisms of that debate. Again, he was there in person. I just want to go ahead and play the video for you. It's about 2 minutes. Listen to what Glenn had to say. He's pretty spot on with these things. Plus, he was actually there.
You saw these politicians, Nikki Haley, Christie, Tim Scott, Mike Pence, who really sound like they're from the Republican Party of 2004, 2008, 2012. They would fit perfectly within the party of Mitt Romney and John McCain and George Bush when he was running. I don't think they have any conception of the fact that the reason 2016 and Donald Trump's victory was such a cataclysmic moment in American politics, it isn't that Trump ushered in changes in how Republican Party voters were thinking about things like militarism and imperialism and war and priorities and the swamp and their contempt for corporatism and lobbyists and the way that they run Washington. Those sentiments predated Trump. He detected them, he observed them, and he was the one who was able best to give voice to them. If you go back and look at Ron Paul's campaign in 2008 and 2012, he was sounding exactly those same things. Going into South Carolina and Iowa and some of the deepest red districts that are in the early part of that Republican presidential campaign and railing against neoconservatives and the evils of the Iraq War and the complete waste of funds that go into constant new regime change wars in places like Syria and Libya that not only come at the expense of the American people in terms of the money that's spent not on their interests but on the interests of other people, but also the dangers that are brought to the United States as a result of doing that. The reason why there's so much anti-Americanism, the reason why the world is now gathering in this confederation under BRICS, under China, that's expanding because of this narrative. And so I don't think these politicians have any sense at all of the radical changes in the views of the population, of the people who compose their own parties. They sound like Reagan-era militarists when it comes to foreign policy, and that is just radically out of step with the Republican Party voter, which is why you see Vivek rising in the polls while Donald Trump has a 45-point lead, while DeSantis remains a viable candidate, while avoiding that sort of thing, and the rest of them who sound like they're from that old Republican establishment era cannot get traction, and it's inconceivable that they will, because the things they're saying actually resonate now more in the Democratic Party.
Where's the lie? We're going to look at the poll. If you haven't had a chance to go ahead and vote, go ahead and vote. So we'll see what you guys thought in reference to who is the biggest threat towards Donald Trump. Which GOP candidate is the biggest threat to Trump? 9% said Nikki Haley, 18% said Ron DeSantis, 65% said Vivek Ramaswamy, and 8% said Christie. And I can only put 4 choices in reference to the YouTube poll. They only give me 4 options. I can only put 4 down. But at the same time, the other people wouldn't have made it on this list anyway, because they're not, I'm not feeling it. We're not feeling it. Like, let's just be real. Tim Scott can go home. Aisha can go home. Doug, who forgot to mention Bank of North Dakota in reference to economic issues, can also go home. These people we know they're not going nowhere. Nikki may still have a chance. Christie might still hang around, but those 3 people I just mentioned to you, they can go ahead and go home.